Now, Chris Newman is the owner of Silvanaqua Farms in Charlottesville, Virginia. And recently, he made a Facebook post that is both controversial and, because of that, has gone viral. Now, the post was about his thoughts on a recent Love Trump's Hate rally. It was actually a counter-protest that happened sometime last week. Now, the rally was held in response to white supremacist Richard Spencer leading a protest against the removal of a Confederate statue. So, in this post that has over 5,000 shares, he details some of the problems that he sees with subtle racism as opposed to overt racism that is happening in his hometown of Charlotte. Now, he says, I know some folks are really feeling themselves about this whole Love Trump's Hate counter rally to Richard Spencer's punch-worthy shenanigans in Lee Park. I'd like to appreciate it, but frankly, I just don't. Very interesting. So let's get into the reasons of why he doesn't appreciate this. He says, I like this town for this natural beauty, its small size, the friendliness of its people, and its food. But folks, here's something else. Charlottesville is by far the most aggressively segregated place I've ever lived or visited. And he was actually surprised because, well, this is a university town. Well, just more liberal, it's got that college atmosphere, and generally should be more of a progressive area, right? Now, he says aggressively for two reasons. So he lays this out. One, because of how assertive police and the citizens who summon them are here with racial profiling. And so racial profiling, definitely a big problem all across the country. Doesn't matter if you're in the South, or doesn't matter if you're in New York City, which also happens to be a big problem. They did a lot of issues, they had a lot of issues with racial profiling, for example, in New York. So it gets bad everywhere. Now, Newman said it got so bad in 2014, 2015 that he stopped renting farmland on estates where he could be easily seen from the road. He said, I also stopped making food deliveries into wealthier neighborhoods because of how often police would happen by and sometimes even question me for 5 and 10 minutes after I got a strange look from a passerby. Now, he said, I'm not a paranoid kind of guy, but this happened way too often to be a coincidence. And I think he's onto something when it comes to this, because it's not a coincidence. It is, as he mentioned, racial profiling. And this is something that a lot of people, especially people who look like me, don't have to face. I never get stopped randomly by police officers and get chatted to for 5 or 10 minutes. So I think a lot of people who look like me would be like, come on, dude, that's crazy. You must be paranoid. No. This does happen. So that's why he has to preface this, and it's kind of sad, but it's like, hey, dude, I'm not being paranoid. Really, this happens to me all the time. So what does it have to do with liberals? What does it have to do with the Love Trump's Hate counter rally and why he's not impressed with it? Now, he said, it isn't Richard Spencer calling the cops on me for farming while black. It's nervous white women in yoga pants with I'm with her and coexist stickers on their German SUVs. So, that sounds fairly liberal. Especially the I'm with her stuff, man. Now, look, this is very important. It's a very important point. Because it kind of calls back to something that I've talked about before at length. And that's the issue of implicit bias. Now, we all have these internal implicit biases against people who look different. It's not something that we're conscious of for the most part. And it's something that is often learned in early age. And it's not something that we're really conscious of that we're doing, right? And this goes even down to the subtle, for example, a woman getting into an elevator with a black man who clutches her purse a little tighter. And that's what this is. And you don't think they don't notice that? Well, other people notice that, but the person who's doing it, do they notice that? Do they know why they're doing that? Oftentimes, they actually don't know. They don't know that they're doing this. So, again, this is not to call people who do that racist. This is pointing out that, hey man, this is the little things that happen, and this is the little things that make me feel uncomfortable in this area. And there are also other little things. For example, he goes after cultural appropriation within the city. Quote, it's the little things, e.g. shops and other businesses incorporating wide swaths of hip-hop culture into their branding while not having a single black owner, partner, employee, or vendor. And those businesses are killing it here. This is a town where blackness advances white-owned brands, but subjects black-owned businesses to inspection by law enforcement. Do you really think, he asks, that problem comes from people like Richard Spencer? He gives another example. Check out Seville's weekly Instagram feed when you get a moment, and try not to notice that the few depictions of black people are limited to sports, singing, criminal justice, or single parenthood. White people, meanwhile, are represented as political activists, chefs, cogs in the gig economy, musicians, dancers, people who get married, visual artists, songwriters, architects, landscapers, thespians, artistic directors, wedge heel wearing rugby players, dog lovers, farmers, firefighters, and people who play with their kids in cul-de-sacs. He says Richard Spencer is not the editor of Seville Weekly. Very interesting. And this goes again to the stereotyping that African Americans often go through, as yes, people who are into sports and rap songs and criminal justice and being single parents. I think all of those, yeah, we have definitely seen all the stereotyping that goes on with the African American community. So I think his examples are excellent. Now, he said, truth is, as a black dude, I'm far less bothered by the flag wavers in this picture, and it was a picture of the Confederate flag protesters, then this town's progressives, assuming its race problem, has nothing to do with them. The former is a visual inconvenience. The latter could leave my daughters without a father. So please, put down the candles and instead ask yourself, why is my city like this? Why is life like this for black people in my wonderful city? The answer is a lot closer to home than Richard Spencer or Lee Park. Wow. So again, this is Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay. So where they do have Confederate monuments up. And again, I've seen a lot of people cheering. Like, yeah, we got rid of the Confederate monument. Okay, let's go home. Well, this guy's saying, no, don't go home. Your protest is fine, but we still have work to do. We still have work to do with actual institutional racism. Don't just pat yourself on the back. In fact, later on in the interview, he said exactly that with CBS affiliate Newsplex. He said the thing that bothered me wasn't so much the protests themselves, but the back patting for it. There's a difference between confronting racists and confronting racism. And I think that is a really excellent point. I think sometimes we do get caught up so much fighting the Richard Spencers of the world. And again, they need to be fought. They need to be confronted because their ideas are odious. They're horrific. They're old. And old isn't necessarily bad, but in this case, it's 1850s old, okay? He's such a bad person that, and we need to fight against him, right? Now, when we win, when you fight against somebody that terrible and you win, you feel like, okay, hey, great. I won, mission accomplished. Let's go home. We solved the issue. But you didn't actually solve the issue because it turns out it is much bigger than people like Spencer. And I don't mean to demean anybody, and I don't think he means to demean anybody that is fighting and has been fighting institutional racism in the white progressive community. I don't think that's all the intent. The intent is to point out that, hey man, we got a bigger thing to go after. We're not solving the problem when all we do is protest and then we go home. And that's it. We need to look in our own neighborhoods, our own lives, and to fight against our own biases, even while we fight against the more obvious problems like white supremacy. And it starts with looking at, I believe, our internal bias, our inherent biases. Look, I have an inherent bias. We all do. And this is something that, growing up, me personally, in a very, very white area, all my life, of course I wasn't exposed to other people and other experiences. I was actually exposed to some very racist ideology and stuff that I, like, and whenever I was confronted with it, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. Why would you hate somebody based on their skin color? But even so, when you go against the obvious examples of racism, you know, as obvious as people putting on Klan hats. Well, okay, well, it's easy to fight against that because they're so unbelievably, undeniably wrong. But you can still perpetuate these inherent biases and this inherent structural racism that exists. Even as small of the things like being a little bit more on guard when you're near a black person. So these are the things that we need to look at. And this is the kind of stuff that Chris Newman, he's trying to point out. I mean, the guy doesn't even feel comfortable doing deliveries into the wealthy neighborhoods anymore because of nervous, young people or nervous people who are Hillary Clinton supporters, from what it sounds like. And that's just an example. It doesn't have to be Hillary Clinton supporters or anything like that. But this is an example of, young people who are supposed to be liberal, progressive, and who actually are liberal and progressive, not understanding that they too also have their own inherent biases, and that's something that they need to tackle. So, and that's what we absolutely need to do. And, people like me, I realize it, and I fight against that every day. And it's one of those things that we just all need to be prepared, we all need to be, yes, obviously prepared to fight, but also we need to be cognizant of it if we're going to fight it in the first place. So I think this was an excellent article, and it was an excellent post, and I think it's something that is going to start a bigger conversation within, hopefully, the progressive community. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.